also have with us Laura Sullivan, Director of the Economic Justice Program at the New Jersey Institute of Social Justice. So thank you, and let's begin. All right, let's give it up. Thank you both so much for being here. Thank you, Gina Fisher, for this film, this powerful work. I think I'll just ask a few questions and then I want to get the audience involved in the conversation. So, can you just give us kind of the origin story of this project? What brought you to this issue and the stories?
Absolutely. So I actually got a call from Seville Productions that they were looking for somebody to co-direct this feature. And we had, previously they had story producers who had been looking into this issue around predatory lending. Originally they thought maybe they should do something on check cashing and you know, that very specific area, but soon realized that it was much larger than that. And that really the home and home ownership sort of are the foundation for building wealth. And if there's predatory lending and inequality in that, that affects everything. You know, what people have access to in terms of schools, jobs, healthcare, climate, you know, just so many different issues. So I of course had my own experience growing up with, you know, I was an Army brat, so I kind of lived everywhere, but we didn't get our first home until the 80s. And even though my dad was a veteran and had access to the GI Bill, really for blacks, that was much delayed. So he wasn't really able to take advantage of that until the 1980s when we got our first home. And we weren't able to hold on to that. And so I knew that this was an issue. I just didn't know how deep it went, and that it was still such a pervasive issue. And when you go to a place like Detroit and you saw so many of those images, it's even more stark in person. When T talks about it feels like a third world country, it really does. In many ways, it felt like the country, like, you know, the South, where I spent time, you know, because you have all this vacant land from houses that have been torn down, and then there's just abandoned houses sitting everywhere. So yeah, there was, you know, there was a lot that I didn't know, and I think in particular that Black women were most impacted by all of this. So there was a lot to learn for me as well.
And can you speak about just about your approach to telling the story? You know, it's such a holistic story. It gives us a history. There's so many layers to the systemic issues at play, but it's so beautifully anchored in the portraits of these Black women. Can you just talk about, you know, your directorial approach?
Absolutely, thank you for that question, because, you know, I think it's so easy to think of redlining as something in the past, and, you know, we know that the systemic racism really prevented Blacks from home ownership for so long, and the point is really that is still alive today, that it's very difficult for Blacks to obtain mortgages, especially in certain neighborhoods. And we didn't want it to feel like something that was in the past. We really wanted you to feel the urgency of the issue today. And I think it was also important for it not to feel like a victim story or a sense of helplessness, but to feel some agency. And the agency really comes from these women who do have a community of other housing activists in Detroit. They're very strong. You saw that when they were mounting that eviction defense. There are groups, a number of groups that are fighting for housing justice, and they are there to support the Black women and the Black folks in the community who are trying to hold on to their homes. So for us, it was really important to show that these women have agency, they have voice, they are activated by their own struggle, but they know that it's larger than themselves, and if they can join as a group, they're going to be more powerful. And Summer was really our anchor. She introduced us to the community, she brought us in, she trusted us, and really, she's the one who's doing this work. She's now working on the national level. Like she said at the end of the film, she wants to build that roadmap to home ownership, and if anybody can do it, it's Summer.
And so, Laura, thank you for being here. I wanted to talk a little bit about your work, and really I want to get your kind of strongest reactions. You are Director of Economic Justice at the New Jersey Institute of Social Justice. You all track these issues very closely, have released a number of reports about these issues here in our state. What were kind of your strongest reactions, and how does it connect to what you're observing here?
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm so pleased to be able to be here because this film really is just a powerful representation of what we're seeing also here in New Jersey. The film really highlights that these are national issues, and we definitely are seeing what is highlighted in the film here in New Jersey. I think it's really poignant in the film when the professor mentions that we're not here by accident, right? And we got here from a history of policies that led us to these disparities. And in New Jersey, folks may know that we are one of the most unequal states in the nation. So whether it's wealth overall or housing in particular, I just want to highlight a few ways that I saw the statistics in the film and how it relates to what we're doing here in New Jersey. So the very first moments of the film highlight the homeownership disparities between Black and white households. In New Jersey, we have actually even slightly higher disparities here at 77% of white families, over 3/4 of white families own their own home, compared to about 41% of Black families. In Essex County, the disparities are even greater. Homeownership overall is a little bit lower, but it's 67% for white families, and under 30% homeownership in Essex County for Black families. So we see, enormous disparities in who owns a home. And we have a report actually called Black Homeownership Matters that tracks some of the ongoing barriers to Black homeownership in New Jersey. And in that report, we find many of the things that are highlighted in the film. Continuing barriers to fair lending, higher income Black families getting worse mortgage rates than lower income white families. In addition to that, just overall wealth, the racial wealth gap in New Jersey, the median or typical white family has about $322,500 in wealth, compared to less than $18,000 for your median Black family. So we have a $300,000 racial wealth gap. Nationally, it's about $160,000 gap. So our gap is almost twice that, and housing and the cost of housing here in New Jersey is a big part of that. And just one other thing, I thought of in terms of where we are here in New Jersey as I was watching the film, is that we have seen among the highest foreclosure rates in the nation consistently. We were the highest foreclosure rates for 5 years leading up to the pandemic. Fortunately, we had some protections and moratoriums protecting people from that during that period of the pandemic, but that has now ended. And again, we're among the top few states in terms of foreclosure. So the vulnerabilities in terms of housing security that we see in this film are really present here.
I'll just do one more follow-up before I open it up. One of the participants, like Nigeria?
Naisha?
Naija. When the text came across the screen about her home being originally owned by an investment company based in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
You know, we've had a report here released by Rutgers University, who owns Newark. So I'm just curious, like, firstly, just the idea that an investment company in another country can buy a house that is not fit for living, but then legally sell it to someone. It seems like the lack of regulation is astounding. So I'm just wondering, like, how did the government play in your film, or were they willing to talk with you? What was their role in all of this?
I love that question. What was the role of the city and the state in regulating these land contracts? Well, they both say they don't have any that they don't have any legal hold over these contracts, that they can't do anything about them, which just seems crazy. We did push to talk to the mayor, and the question that we got was, is this going to be another negative portrayal of Detroit? And it's really, not even necessarily about the city. It really is about, of course, the conditions that have been created, and that the city's kind of left these folks behind. But it's, really from the perspective of them trying to fight back. And so we were like, what is the city going to say? They're going to probably feed us some line, but of course we gave them an opportunity to speak, and they didn't show up. What they did tell us is that they've set up a website warning against, the issues around, or the risks of entering these land contracts, but they still refuse to regulate them, which, again, seems crazy. There's a lot of groups that are pressing for regulation of these. But what does happen when people enter these contracts, and, again, there's no regulation that says a home has to, have a furnace, it has to, be up to date in taxes. There's no kind of baseline for selling these homes. There's no oversight. So, what happens when, 90% of people end up defaulting on these contracts and become month-to-month renters? Believe me, the government is right on top of that eviction. So that is where they are regulating. You see the bailiff turning up, when she was already moving. So it's very problematic. I do know that I think there are some folks in Congress who've been looking into land contracts. But again, there hasn't been any laws put in place or any kind of governmental oversight. And that's one of the things that we hope the film will, educate folks and bring about some action.
And just, from your side of things, on that particular issue, are land contracts something that we're seeing in this region? I'm sure there also are other implications of corporations buying single-family dwellings and how that affects our communities.
Absolutely, yeah. Land contracts is an issue that we've been following. I even saw something in the news about it this week. But I can't say that I know, I have any statistics on, exactly what's happening here. But, it's something surely that I would expect is happening here as well. In terms of LLCs buying properties, as you pointed out, the Rutgers client report, who owns Newark, really highlights how LLCs have been purchasing properties here in Newark. I was looking at the report just recently, and I believe they noted that just under half of 1 through 4 unit properties were bought by LLCs in a recent period that they were studying. And so the ability for families to buy homes in Newark is being pushed out because of these LLCs coming in. And then, as you pointed out, they're very often not maintaining the properties in a way that's appropriate.
All right. I want to open up to the audience. I know you also do policy. You have a lot of ideas for solutions, so we will get to that. But let's open it up to the audience for questions.
Okay. I want to thank you for the film, first of all, and I wanted to just, when I was looking at it, one of the things I noticed is that most of the folks who you were interviewing or in the documentary were from maybe a lower socioeconomic level, but one of the things I think about in New Jersey, I work with folks who've been doing, working on housing moratorium on the state level and local level, and one of the things is that it's across the especially for people of African descent and Latinos, that it's across the socioeconomic level. People with expensive houses and less expensive houses are affected by foreclosures, and foreclosures, the mortgage company can buy the house back in New Jersey for $100 or $1,000 at an auction, but the homeowner can't bid on it at that time. So it's another kind of problem in the state of New Jersey. So I wanted to get some insight about that in Detroit, and elsewhere. If you saw, I got a lot of family in Detroit. And then the last question I wanted to say is just when you think about in the film how you were that there were funds. Are there other programs to help people, even to do kind of like renovations and stuff like that in Detroit? And what is the maybe outreach to help people be in touch with those kinds of things in outside of the predatory lenders? But maybe the sister, Elijah, if there was someone who could help her to understand that there was some grants or something else, are there other kinds of things like that available?
Absolutely, and you might also want to chime in too, Laura. So in terms of the across the socioeconomic spectrum, I would say that Summer actually, when she purchased her first home or was trying to purchase it, she was a single mom and not making very much money. But today she really is middle class. Her husband makes a very good living working for Chrysler. And they were able to put down $12,000 in a private contract for that home, which is in a neighborhood that is very historic and is owned by judges and teachers and other members of the Black middle class in Detroit. But that said, she kept getting turned down by mortgage companies. She just could not get a mortgage. And until finally you saw at the end they were able to secure one. But I do think that we do see this issue. You read about it in the paper all the time. In Philadelphia, there are Black professionals who have trouble securing mortgages. There's also the appraisal issue where Black homeowners, they're getting lower appraisals than white homeowners. So there, that discrimination, we still see it across the board. In terms of programs for repairs specifically, that was part of the reason those folks were protesting at City Hall, was because there was this pot of money from COVID, actually, that the mayor was deciding what to do with. And the residents were like, we need repairs, we need money for repairs. The housing stock in Detroit is so old. And part of the reason why you see a lot of those homes that are still standing but are, falling down really. Trees growing through them. Some of them are owned by LLCs with people who are just, are corporations that are just holding on to them, waiting for the land to go up in value. But also to tear them down is sometimes a bigger issue because of, their bricks, their lead, there's so many like environmental issues as well. So it makes it very challenging. So, to bring up a lot of these homes to code would cost tens of thousands of dollars, like in Geraldine's case. And some folks are coming in and buying them, buying these houses and, bringing them up. But, there are a number of homeowners who want to be able to repair their homes, and there really aren't enough programs that are providing that kind of resource, or you have to jump through so many hoops, is what we heard from the community. So yeah, I think that is something that people are really crying for, is money to repair their homes, because they do want to hold on to them.
I'll just add the patterns around lending that I noted before. We see that nationally and in New Jersey. Discrimination in both acceptance of a mortgage as well as interest rates. So a Harvard study indicated that higher income Black families were getting higher interest rates for their mortgages than lower income white families. Here in New Jersey, in the most recent data we had, Black high income families had a 12% denial rate for mortgages compared to 10% for white lower income families. So those patterns, really persist and impact people of all incomes looking for mortgages. Can I talk about the appraisal piece a little bit? Since she brought it up as well, that's one area that we're working on quite a bit. Working on legislation here in the state of New Jersey to combat and end appraisal discrimination in New Jersey. So there's currently pending legislation, S777, A1519, which would codify into state law prohibition of discrimination in appraisals. There's already protections in the Federal Fair Housing Act, but this would put it into state law, clarify what would happen to someone who's found to have discriminated, and also provide consumer information so that folks know more about what is appraisal discrimination and who to go to if they think maybe they've experienced that, as well as collecting the information on those complaints, which is not currently done in the state. So that's something that we're advocating for and really hope will pass this year in New Jersey.
Hi, thank you so much for creating this film and even just being here to talk with us about it. I'm wondering if I can ask about your directorial approach to just making the subjects, the interviewees feel comfortable sharing this story and I guess putting allowing a platform for this story. I think as an audience member, I definitely felt defeat come through, but I also felt a lot of strength and a lot of courage. So I'm just wondering how did you encourage them to put that through to camera?
Thank you for that question. Even before we go to a place, we're spending a lot of time talking with the folks in the film, and we did a number of Zooms with them once I and Kate came on board. Like I said, the story editors had been interviewing folks before we came on board. But then, it was a matter of us establishing that kind of rapport and relationship. And Kate and I were the only outsiders on the project. Everybody else was from Detroit. The producer on the ground, all of the crew, they live in Detroit. The researcher, she works for the Detroit Free Press. She was the one who actually broke the story about the overtaxation of $600 million in taxes for Detroit residents. So we made sure that we were also staffing with people who know the lay of the land, who know, how to connect with the folks there. That's their community. And so, you come in with really respecting that and, a sense of gratitude for sure that, these folks are opening up their homes and are willing to share their stories. And you just, for me, it's always about giving people space to share what it is they want to share and to allow that to evolve. I think, because Geraldine's situation, she had already gone through it, but even just talking about it, you saw that the trauma was still there. And, we were fortunate that Summer came with us. So here's again somebody she's familiar with who was fighting beside her. That her sons were there as well. It wasn't just, me and the director, the other co-director, sitting there asking her questions. It was really, giving her that space and that support so that she could feel comfortable to share, and kind of relive that experience, which was still very painful for her. And we actually had the premiere of the film. That's always the true test. We hadn't shown the film to any of the participants until our premiere, which was at the Freak Festival in Detroit, and the film won the Shine the Light Award there. And thank you. But the whole community turned out, not just the people in the film, but all, some of those faces of folks who were protesting at the eviction defense, who were at City Hall, the activists turned up. But for Geraldine and Summer to be there, Donna, to sit there and, they were just like, wow, you got it. You really captured it. And they were grateful for us to tell the story because they knew that others would benefit from seeing it. Even Nisha felt that way, even though she knew, that there's a lot of shame, there's so much shame that comes around, facing eviction. The thought of losing your home. But she felt taken advantage of. And that's a very, different place, which she was. She was a victim of predatory lending. And she didn't quite understand that, how this all transpired, but she knew that it was wrong. And she didn't want other women to be placed in that same position. So, that's the true test when people feel that their story, was portrayed in a way that is true to who they were, but also gives a sense of hope, and also has meaning for others who are coming behind them.
That was a fascinating film, and I appreciate what you did. I wanted to know, I didn't see any evidence of any lawyers helping the people. I mean, they have a vibrant Black Lawyers Association there in Detroit, and then the other legal groups, I'm sure. Were there any people helping?
Absolutely. So Ted Phillips, who is speaking in the film, who runs United Community Housing Coalition, he actually is a lawyer and has been working in housing justice for 30 plus years. He lives in Detroit. He bought his house on a land contract. He doesn't think all land contracts are bad, and in fact, their organization will buy some of these homes, when people are, going into default on their contracts. They will come in and try to buy some of them, repair these homes, and basically, provide the homes, set up a new contract at zero interest. He's been fighting for years, and they really do try to provide lawyers for everybody that they can. You heard there's some 40 to 50,000 cases a year. So they can't get to every case. And the thing is, there's not even a requirement, or not every resident gets a lawyer. And that's also something the residents have been fighting for, which is to have that representation. Because if you have the legal representation, you're more likely to keep your home. So, you're right, that is a key and critical piece. And Detroit residents understand that, and they have been fighting for that legal representation.
The one thing I was going to mention is you mentioned about with the what was it? People had the LLC issue, and I wanted to mention that possibly with the LLC issue, I think part of that, maybe the Rutgers piece, is I'm a sociologist, and I think some of it is maybe a misrepresentation, because I think part of that is that people of African descent and others actually learn how to play the game, and they're using the LLC as a tool to be able to do what other folks have been doing for many years, but now we are figuring out how to navigate the space. And so some of those LLCs there's a bunch of African Americans who are using that process now to build their communities. And so there's a sister who lives in Jersey, Dr. Keisha Moore, and she did a study on black gentrifiers. And so then in her work, she's talking about that black gentrifiers are actually doing something different, right? And that they're helping to build up the community. And I think that we don't talk about that enough in the process, that gentrification is not just this taking thing, but there's also an investment in it. And I think we have to think about both of those things.
There was a line in the movie that said some things about segregation via economics now. And I know that in New Jersey, foreclosures, they can foreclose, and whoever buys it, they get 18% interest on what, I don't know any type of CD or bond I'm gonna get an 18% return, and yet that's allowed on people's backs, homeowners' backs. So it seems like, and mayors will allow this to happen because they need the revenue. The people can't pay. So it's like, where is the money coming from? It seems like it just boils down to there can be lawyers, there can be LLCs, there can be representation. It boils down to more money dropping out of.
I'm not sure I have a specific response, but I think, there's a number of different areas that people are working in to address, the access to housing, access to home ownership. So that's, what we're doing at the Institute from a number of different angles. So we think housing is a key component of wealth building, and so we're working actually in a number of different areas, but housing is so core to wealth building that we really, that's one of our core areas of focus. And so just like wealth building needs to be addressed comprehensively, access to homeownership, access to wealth building needs to be addressed comprehensively. So one of the things that we really point out in our report is that we need to tackle not just disparities in who owns a home, but there's disparities in the financial benefits of homeownership. And those financial benefits, the disparities in the financial benefits of homeownership have to do with the predatory lending, have to do with the segregation in our state. We are one of the most segregated states in the country as well, the 6th most segregated in terms of schools. So there's a number of different factors that we highlight in our report, but those are 2 key ones that really contribute to what we see in terms of the ability to build wealth. So again, we didn't get here by accident. Policy got us here. I love how the movie highlights the different sort of points across our history that got us to where we are today. So I don't know if it's specifically mentioned, but the movie highlights the racially restrictive covenants that segregated our neighborhoods in addition to redlining. So that was very present in New Jersey as well, and that's something that we are looking into investigating more and need to be actively fighting against.
Yeah, it takes some policy, right? And I think one of the things that Ted Phillips pointed out is that, when you go back to the economics, it is about, can these businesses make money, right? Is it worth their investment? And, getting mortgages that are under 100,000, which is what some of these low-income communities need, and they can't find, and that's why they end up going to the predatory lenders. But if we can find ways to get the banks interested, or other organizations, or perhaps, groups of Black folk who are, pooling their resources together to form LLCs. There has to be some concerted efforts to provide those economic ramps for all people at all economic levels to get into the system. We can't just be motivated by greed, but that is the system we're in. So it's like, how do we combat that so that we create more opportunities for equality, for getting, for lessening that gap between white and Black home ownership. All of the things that need to be done to build that wealth.
Sororities, fraternities, Black church. If you
Absolutely.
have some policy initiatives, you've seen it close up. There are ways, Hong Kong does not care. Hong Kong's never gonna care. And if there are some type of initiatives that we can put in place for people who are stepping up, then that means you have a brain trust, and you need to put it together in terms of policy.
Right.
But thank you. This was wonderful.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for this wonderful film. I just want to make 2 comments, and it just kind of answers the question that was asked. New Jersey, the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights does care. I don't work for them by any means, and I think New Jersey has a long way to go. But just last year, there was a major settlement reached between the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights and Trident Mortgage Company, LP, and Fox and Roach over allegations of red-based redlining and lending practices in New Jersey, that they were only lending to whites with superior credit, overlooking people who could have afforded it, but just they weren't white. And so that was a press release from last year, July 27, 2022. And this was a $20 million settlement, and the way that they structured it is so that it becomes loan subsidies and other relief for the people who were denied, right, so that they can become homeowners. So I think, there's part of that came from having someone in the New Jersey Division on Civil Rights that comes from the community that has been affected by it, and so representation and people, in leadership matters, because then it leads to great outcomes like this. So that's one comment, and that's maybe a ray of sunshine.
There's so much. There's so much that's wrong in the world. there's so much that's right too and good. But yeah, there's a lot of issues right now. And I think if I used to be a journalist for many years actually, and reported the news, and went out to do the stories of tragedy and loss, and you can feel a sense of helplessness. But I feel as a filmmaker, I'm not necessarily, looking at those issues with that kind of like, oh, here we go again, where you just get really, just overwhelmed by them. I think for me, the storytelling, being able to look at things through the lens of other people's lives, helps me make sense of it, and to feel in some way that I'm contributing to, maybe raising issues or really helping people understand them at a different level. I think it's the heart level more than, this intellectual level, because this is a very complicated issue, right? It has so many different layers. There's so many different ways that you could talk about housing and barriers to Black home ownership. But for me, it's always about the heart and the emotion, and how do you reach people in a way so that they feel it, and I think the feeling is what lasts, and hopefully that's what brings us to action. I think that's really important. And I know there was another part to your question, but I couldn't remember it. But I think that, I tend to tell stories at the intersection of race and gender and identity. Some of my previous films have been about the war on women's reproductive health. I have a film out right now called The Dads, which will be coming to Netflix. And that is about 5 fathers of trans kids who take a weekend fishing trip with Dennis Shepard, the father of Matthew Shepard, who was killed in the 90s. I do a lot of stories about the LGBTQ community as a mother of a trans child. So, this is, I think, my way of, affecting the world that my children have to grow up in. How can I leave the world a
Kokomo City documentary. I'll be there for that for sure. On Saturday night, Juice, and then shorts, a wonderful shorts program. Sunday, another wonderful shorts program, and a closing film story ad and a party. So please come back. And Invisible Beauty is in there somewhere. Pick up a pocket guide on
What?